The blood oath shattered the moment Adelheid pressed the infant against her chest and ran toward the burning barn, her bare feet tearing across frozen ground as the royal decree hunters closed in behind her. The child, Herzog Ulrich's true heir, whimpered once before she clamped her hand over his tiny mouth, her heart breaking at the necessity. Behind them, torches pierced the moonless night like hungry eyes, and the pack law enforcers shouted coordinates to one another, their voices carrying promises of execution for anyone harboring the forbidden bloodline. She didn't know the rogue leaning against the oak tree 50 yards distant was watching her every desperate movement. Didn't know those amber eyes tracking her flight belonged to the same man who'd whispered promises against her skin 3 winters ago, before the council declared him traitor, before they'd burned his name from every record, before they'd told her he was dead. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what's about to unfold will tear at every piece of your heart. The barn door hung crooked on rusted hinges, and Adelheid shoved it open with her shoulder, disturbing a cascade of ash that still floated from last week's raid. The rebels had hidden here once. Now only char and memories remained. She clutched the boy tighter. Little Casper, they'd named him in secret, after her grandfather who'd died defending the old ways. And her wolf stirred beneath her skin, begging to be released, to fight, to protect this innocent life that represented everything the new regime feared. But she couldn't shift. The moment she transformed, they'd track her essence signature across 3 territories. She'd be dead before dawn, and the child would be presented to the council as proof that Herzog Ulrich's line had been cleansed. The rogue, Albrecht, though she didn't know it yet, straightened from the tree, his scarred face betraying nothing as he watched the woman he'd loved disappear into the structure that was already beginning to smoke again. Someone had set a second fire. The enforcers wanted to flush out any resistance still hiding in the territory. He'd returned for her. After 3 years of exile, of fighting his way through territories that had placed bounties on his head, of clawing his way back from near death a dozen times, he'd finally made it home. But he'd returned too late. The child she carried wasn't his, or so he believed. The timeline didn't match. He'd been gone 37 months, and this infant looked barely 12 weeks old. The pain of her betrayal sat like iron in his chest. Inside the barn, Adelheid found the hiding space she'd prepared 2 days ago, when she'd first heard whispers that the council knew about Casper's existence. A false floor panel beneath rotted hay, leading to a root cellar that the original builders had constructed for storing winter provisions. She'd lined it with blankets stolen from the packhouse, had hidden supplies, milk powder, water, warm clothes. Enough for 3 days if she rationed. She just needed 3 days for her sister Greta to return from the Northern Territory with the forged passage documents. Casper whimpered again, and Adelheid felt her heart splinter. "Hush, little heart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just a little longer. Be brave for Mama." The word caught in her throat. She wasn't his Mama. She was his protector, his guardian, the woman who'd made a sacred vow the night he was born to keep him safe from those who'd killed his true mother. But after 12 weeks of holding him, feeding him, soothing his cries in the darkness, the distinction had blurred. She descended into the cellar and pulled the panel shut above them just as boots thundered across the barn floor overhead. "Search every corner." The voice belonged to Dietrich, the council's lead enforcer, a man who'd once been Adelheid's betrothed before she'd broken their engagement and fled to Herzog Ulrich's protection. His cruelty had been legendary even then. Now, empowered by the new regime, he'd become something monstrous. "The traitor bitch is here. I can smell her desperation." Adelheid pressed Casper against her shoulder, her hand still covering his mouth, her own breath coming in silent gasps. The cellar smelled of earth and decay and old potatoes, but beneath it she caught another scent. Wolf musk, fresh and male. Someone else had been here recently. Her instincts screamed danger. Overhead, the enforcers tore through the barn, their claws extended, ripping through wood and hay. Smoke began to seep through the cracks in the floor panel, and Adelheid realized with growing horror that they'd set the barn ablaze while they searched. They didn't care if they burned her alive. They'd sift through the ashes afterward to find proof of the forbidden heir's death. The council intervention had begun 3 months ago, when Herzog Ulrich had refused to sign the Blood Consolidation Act, a piece of legislation that would have stripped alpha rights from any bloodline deemed impure by the Council's new genetic standards. Ulrich's own line had traces of witch ancestry 5 generations back, a fact that had never mattered until the purity movement gained power. They'd killed him on the steps of his own pack house, made his mate watch. Then they'd hunted down every relative, every friend, every ally who might harbor sympathy for the old ways. Adelheid had been Herzog Ulrich's cousin's daughter, barely connected enough to escape the initial purge. But she'd been there the night his mate gave birth, had caught the infant when the midwife fled, had heard the dying mother's final plea. Hide him. Protect him. He's the heir to the throne, the true alpha. Don't let them erase our bloodline. Caspar stirred against her chest, and Adelheid felt milk leak through her shirt, a bodily response her wolf had triggered to help feed the orphaned pup. Her breasts had swollen with nurturing instinct even though she'd never been pregnant, a rare gift among female wolves that emerged only in the presence of an abandoned infant from their own pack line. Smoke thickened in the cellar. Temperature rose. Outside the barn, Albrecht made his decision. He'd come to confirm she'd betrayed him, to see with his own eyes the life she'd built without him. But watching the enforcer set fire to the structure while she remained trapped inside triggered something primal in his chest, a bond he'd thought severed but that now blazed as bright as the flames consuming the barn. He stepped from the shadows, his wolf rising to the surface, his alpha presence flooding the clearing with undeniable authority. The enforcers turned as one, their faces paling as they recognized what stood before them. Impossible, Dietrich breathed. You're dead. We burned your corpse 3 years ago. Albrecht smiled, and it was a terrible thing. You burned my brother's corpse. Poor Wendelin. He died protecting my escape, and you never realized you'd killed the wrong twin. The revelation rippled through the enforcer ranks like a shockwave. Wendelin and Albrecht had been identical, their essences so similar that even experienced wolves had trouble distinguishing between them. When the council had declared Albrecht traitor for refusing to participate in Herzog Ulrich's assassination, they'd sent hunters after both brothers. Wendelin had bought Albrecht's freedom with his life. It doesn't matter, Dietrich snarled, though fear edged his voice. You're one wolf against 12 enforcers. The pack law is clear. Any wolf harboring or defending the forbidden bloodline dies with them. Then it's fortunate, Albrecht said softly, his eyes glowing amber in the firelight, that I'm not just any wolf. I'm the rogue king of the Eastern Territories, commander of 4 exiled packs, and I've spent 3 years building an army specifically to burn your new regime to ash. He moved before Dietrich could respond, his transformation instant and brutal. Where a man had stood, a massive silver wolf now crouched, larger than any natural wolf had right to be. His alpha bloodline expressing itself in raw physical dominance. He hit the first enforcer before the others could shift, his jaws closing around the man's throat with surgical precision. Inside the cellar, Adelheid heard the sounds of battle overhead. Snarls, screams, the wet crunch of bodies hitting walls. She clutched Caspar tighter, her mind racing. Someone was fighting the enforcers. A rogue, maybe, someone with a death wish or a vendetta. She didn't care about their motivations. She cared only that they were buying her time. The smoke grew unbearable. Caspar's coughing began, small desperate sounds that made Adelheid want to scream. She had to get him out, had to risk exposure, because burning alive was certain death while running was only probable death. She pushed against the floor panel, but it didn't budge. The flames had warped the wood, trapping them inside. Panic clawed at her throat. She pushed again, harder, her wolf lending strength to her human arms. The panel cracked but held. Above, the battle sounds diminished. Someone had won, but she didn't know who. Help! The word tore from her throat before she could stop it. Please, there's a child. Silence. Then footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crossing the barn floor. The sound of debris being shoved aside. Claws scraping against wood. The panel ripped away, and Adelheid looked up through smoke and flame into a face she'd thought she'd never see again. Ulrich stared down at her, his human form restored, his chest bare and streaked with blood that wasn't his own. His amber eyes, those same eyes that had memorized every curve of her body, that had watched her sleep on cold winter nights, that had silently promised forever, locked onto hers with an expression of such profound betrayal that Adelheid felt her heart stop. "You," he breathed, and the single word carried 3 years of anguish. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. The infant in her arms chose that moment to wail, and Ulbrich's gaze dropped to Casper's face. Something shifted in his expression, confusion replacing anger, then dawning horror. "Whose child is that?" His voice had gone deadly quiet. Adelheid's mouth opened, but smoke choked her response. The barn groaned, a support beam cracking overhead. Ulrich didn't hesitate. He reached down, hauled her up by her arm, and dragged them both toward the barn door just as the roof collapsed behind them. They burst into the clearing, and Adelheid gasped clean air while Casper screamed his infant fury at the world. Ulrich released her arm and stepped back, putting distance between them, his entire body radiating tension. 12 enforcer corpses lay scattered across the ground. The fire consumed the barn completely now, flames reaching toward the stars like grasping fingers. "Whose child that?" Not a question this time. Demand. Adelheid clutched Casper closer, her protective instincts warring with the shock of Ulbrich's impossible resurrection. He was alive. He was here. He was covered in the blood of men he'd killed to save her. And he was looking at her like she'd destroyed him. "Herzog Ulrich's son," she whispered. "The true heir." Ulbrich's face went blank, a mask sliding into place that she'd never seen him wear before. "You're harboring Ulrich's heir." "I'm protecting him. They killed his mother. They're hunting every drop of his bloodline. I swore an oath." "An oath?" He laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. "You're hiding another man's child." "Came back for you, Adelheid. 3 years of hell, fighting my way through territories that wanted me dead, and I came back for you. And you've been playing mother to a dead man's son." The accusation hit her like a physical blow. "You think I betrayed you? You think Ulrich, they told me you were dead. They showed me Wendelin's body and said it was yours. I mourned you for 6 months before I could even breathe without feeling like I was drowning. Yet here you are with an infant that's, 3 months old. The timeline's interesting, Adelheid. I've been gone 37 months. Did you wait a respectful period before moving on? Or did you find comfort the moment I was declared dead?" The unfairness of it stole her breath. He's not mine. I didn't give birth to him. His mother died 12 weeks ago, and I've been hiding him because someone has to protect the innocent from your council's genocidal purge." Ulbrich's jaw clenched. "My council. I was exiled, or have you forgotten? They declared me traitor the same day they killed Ulrich." "You were exiled for refusing to participate in the assassination," Adelheid shot back. "That doesn't mean you weren't part of the planning stages. Everyone knew you were Councillor Friedrich's protégé, that you sat in on the strategy sessions." "I was Friedrich's spy," Ulrich snarled, his control finally cracking. "I reported everything they planned to Ulrich. I'm the one who warned him about the coup attempt. And when they discovered my betrayal, they didn't just exile me. They tortured me for 3 days trying to extract the names of every wolf in Ulrich's network. Wendelin took my place on the execution pyre so I could escape and build an army to take them down." The revelation hung in the smoke-thick air between them. Adelheid felt reality tilt and recalibrate. "You were on our side. I've always been on our side." His voice broke on the last word. "I loved you. I would have burned the world for you. And I thought when I saw you with that child." Casper's cries intensified, and Adelheid automatically began rocking him, her body responding to his distress even as her mind struggled to process everything Ulrich had said. The man she'd loved wasn't dead, hadn't betrayed their cause, had spent 3 years fighting his way back to her. And she just watched him kill 12 enforcers to save her life. I never moved on, she whispered. I never even looked at another man. This child, Caspar. He's the last of Herzog Ulrich's line. His mother begged me with her dying breath to protect him. So I've hidden him, fed him, loved him as if he were my own. But he's not. He's not yours either, but he's innocent, and he deserves to live. Albrecht stared at her for a long moment, emotions warring across his face too quickly to identify. Then his gaze dropped to Caspar again, and something softened in his expression. Let me see him. Adelheid hesitated, every protective instinct screaming at her to run. But this was Albrecht, the man who'd taught her to track by starlight, who'd held her through nightmares, who'd promised to stand with her against any darkness. She shifted Caspar slightly, allowing Albrecht to step closer. He reached out one scarred hand and gently touched the infant's cheek. Caspar's crying stuttered, then stopped, his tiny gray eyes focusing on Albrecht's face with the peculiar intensity of the very young. He has Ulrich's eyes, Albrecht murmured. The silver gray that marked their bloodline for 12 generations. Yes. Adelheid watched Albrecht's face, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. The council will never stop hunting him. As long as he lives, he represents a threat to their authority. Then we make sure he survives long enough to reclaim his throne. The certainty in Albrecht's voice made Adelheid's breath catch. We. He looked up, meeting her gaze fully for the first time since pulling her from the cellar. You made an oath to protect him. I made an oath to destroy the regime that murdered my pack and my brother. Our paths align, Adelheid. And beyond that. His hand moved from Caspar's cheek to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. I didn't fight my way across 3 territories just to walk away from you again. Relief and longing crashed through her in equal measure. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. I thought you were dead. I buried you in my heart and tried to keep living. I know. His voice gentled. I know, and I'm sorry I believed. The jealousy, it's been eating at me since I arrived. I've watched you for 3 days, trying to understand who the child belonged to, trying to convince myself to just leave. But I couldn't. Even thinking you'd betrayed me, I couldn't stop myself from interfering when they came to kill you. 3 days. Adelheid's eyes snapped open. You've been here 3 days. Guilt flickered across his features. I needed to know if you were worth saving. The words should have stung, but Adelheid understood. She'd have done the same in his position. Trust, once broken, even by death and circumstance rather than choice, required careful rebuilding. Caspar made a small noise, and Adelheid looked down to find him reaching toward Albrecht with one tiny fist. Without thinking, Albrecht offered his finger, and the infant latched on with surprising strength. He likes you, Adelheid observed softly. He's a good judge of character then. Albrecht's lips quirked into something almost resembling a smile. Though his timing could be better. We need to move. I killed Dietrich's entire squad, but he has a secondary team stationed at the border checkpoint. When these enforcers don't report in, they'll send reinforcements. Adelheid nodded, her mind already shifting into survival mode. I was waiting for my sister. She has forged documents. Your sister Greta. At Adelheid's nod, Albrecht's expression darkened. She's not coming. The council arrested her 2 days ago for suspected collaboration. The ground seemed to fall away beneath Adelheid's feet. No, she was careful, They tortured a confession out of someone in the resistance network. 3 names were given up. Greta was one of them. Albrecht's hand tightened around hers. I'm sorry. I tried to mount a rescue, but my people couldn't reach her in time. She was executed yesterday at dawn. The word executed echoed through Adelheid's skull, each repetition driving the reality deeper. Greta, her younger sister, the one who'd braided her hair before her first shift, who'd laughed at inappropriate moments and loved too fiercely, was gone. She felt her knees buckle, but Albrecht caught her, his arms coming around both her and Caspar, holding them upright. "I'm sorry," he repeated against her hair. "I'm so damn sorry." Adelheid didn't cry. Couldn't. The grief was too large, too immediate. It sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. Greta had died protecting the resistance, protecting people like Caspar, protecting the belief that bloodlines mattered less than character. "She died brave," Ulrich said quietly. "My scouts reported that she refused to give up any additional names, even at the end. She protected dozens with her silence." The words were meant as comfort, but they only made the loss more acute. Brave, brilliant Greta, who deserved a long life full of love and laughter, had been snuffed out by the council's paranoid cruelty. Caspar whimpered, sensing the emotional shift, and Adelheid forced herself to breathe. She couldn't afford to collapse. Not here, not now, with enforcers potentially already en route. "Where do we go?" Her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "I have a safe house 3 miles north, across the river. My people control that territory now." Albrecht released her, stepping back slightly but keeping one hand on her arm as if afraid she might collapse again. "It's defensible and we have supplies. We can regroup there, plan our next move." "Your people." Adelheid latched onto the distraction, the practical questions that kept the grief at bay. "You said you built an army. 4 exiled packs united under one banner. The Rogue Kings Coalition they call us, though I hate the theatrical name." A hint of dark humor touched his expression. "Turns out there are a lot of wolves who disagreed with the council's new direction. We've been mounting small resistance operations for 2 years now, sabotaging their supply lines, freeing prisoners, recruiting disillusioned pack members. An actual army." Hope flickered in Adelheid's chest. Small but persistent. "How many?" 317 wolves at last count, plus human allies and some witch covens who remember Herzog Ulrich's protection of their people. Albrecht's gaze was steady. "It's not enough to overthrow the council outright, but it's enough to make them bleed. And with Ulrich's heir alive, with legitimate claim to the throne, we have a symbol that could rally the moderate packs still sitting on the fence." Adelheid looked down at Caspar, this tiny infant who'd become the focal point of a brewing civil war through no choice of his own. He'd fallen asleep in her arms, exhausted by crying and fear, his little face peaceful in a way that made her heart ache. "He's just a baby," she whispered. "He shouldn't have to be a symbol. He should get to have a childhood." "I know." Albrecht's hand moved to rest on Caspar's head, his large palm nearly covering the infant's skull. "But sometimes the world doesn't give us the choices we deserve. It only gives us the choices we can live with. And I'd rather raise him in a war that might win him freedom than hide him away while the council systematically murders everyone who remembers his right to rule." The logic was sound even if the reality was heartbreaking. Adelheid nodded slowly. "Then we fight." "Then we fight," Albrecht agreed. "But first we run. Can you carry him for 3 miles? Adelheid almost laughed. She'd been carrying Caspar and running from danger for 12 weeks. 3 more miles was nothing. "Yes." "Good. Because we're not taking the road. We're cutting through the Tannenwald, and it's rough terrain." The Tannenwald, the pine forest, was old-growth territory, dense and dark and full of natural predators. It was also the fastest route to cross the river without using monitored bridges. Adelheid had grown up hearing stories about wolves who'd entered the Tannenwald and never returned, about ancient magic that still lingered in the oldest trees, about things that hunted the hunters. But ancient forest dangers seemed manageable compared to the council's enforcers. "Lead the way," she said. Albrecht studied her face for a moment, something like pride flickering in his amber eyes. Then he turned, shifting partially, enough to enhance his senses and strength without fully transforming, and began moving north at a steady lope. Adelheid followed, cradling Caspar against her chest, her own wolf rising to give her the speed and endurance she'd need. Behind them, the barn collapsed completely, sending a shower of sparks toward the moon. They ran in silence, saving breath for the miles ahead. The Tannenwald swallowed them within minutes, the ancient pines closing overhead to block out starlight. Adelheid's enhanced vision picked out roots and rocks, her feet finding purchase instinctively as she matched Ulrich's pace. He moved like water through the forest, his familiarity with the terrain obvious. This was his territory now, she realized. Not the lands he'd grown up in, but the wild spaces he'd claimed through survival and will. 20 minutes in, he held up a hand, signaling for her to stop. She froze mid-stride, her heart pounding from exertion and adrenaline. Caspar stirred but didn't wake. Ulrich's nostrils flared as he scented the air. His expression hardened. "We're being followed," he murmured, barely audible even with her enhanced hearing. 3 wolves, maybe 4. They picked up our trail at the barn site. Adelheid's blood ran cold. Enforcers? No, the scent's wrong. These are. He paused, his brow creasing. They're wild pack. Forest wolves. Forest wolves were neutral in the politics that had torn apart the civilized packs. They lived according to older laws, predating the council's authority by centuries. Their territories were sacrosanct, and they didn't interfere in outsider conflicts. Unless those outsiders had violated forest law by entering without permission. "I didn't know the Tannenwald was claimed," Adelheid breathed. "It shouldn't be. The last forest alpha died 15 years ago without an heir. The territory's been unclaimed since." Ulrich's jaw clenched. Someone must have moved in recently. A howl split the night, high and crystalline, carrying both warning and challenge. It was answered by 2 more howls, bracketing them from different directions. They were surrounded. Ulrich moved to stand between Adelheid and the nearest howl source, his body language shifting into defensive posture. "Stay behind me. Don't shift. If you shift, they'll see it as an aggressive act. What do? We negotiate." His voice was grim. "And we pray they're feeling diplomatic." The first wolf emerged from the shadows 30 yards distant, a massive gray female with silver-tipped fur and eyes that glowed like trapped moonlight. She was enormous, easily matching Ulrich's alpha size, her presence radiating an authority that made Adelheid's wolf whimper in submission. 2 more wolves flanked her, equally large, their postures alert but not yet aggressive. The gray female shifted, her transformation smooth and practiced, until a woman stood before them. She looked to be in her mid-40s, her hair prematurely silver, her body marked with ritual scars that Adelheid recognized as forest pack traditions. Her gaze swept over Ulrich with casual assessment before landing on Adelheid and, more specifically, on Caspar. Those moonlight eyes widened fractionally. "The child," the woman said, her voice carrying the resonance of command. "Let me see the child." Every protective instinct in Adelheid's body screamed refusal, but Ulrich made a subtle gesture. "Trust me." She hesitated, then shifted Caspar slightly so the forest alpha could see his face. The woman inhaled sharply. She took 3 steps forward, ignoring Ulrich completely, her focus entirely on the sleeping infant. "Impossible. He was supposed to be dead. They announced his execution 2 months ago." "They lied," Adelheid said, finding her voice. "Or they've been hunting him and trying to cover their failure with false reports. You're protecting Herzog Ulrich's heir." It wasn't a question. The forest alpha's gaze finally lifted to meet Adelheid's. "Do you understand the significance of what you're doing? The danger you've brought to every wolf who helps you?" "Yes." Adelheid's voice didn't shake. "I understand, and I'd do it again. He's innocent. He deserves to live." Something shifted in the alpha's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. "I am Brunhild, alpha of the Tannenwald pack. We remember Herzog Ulrich's kindness to the forest peoples when the council wanted to clear-cut our territory for development. He stood against them, used his political power to protect lands that weren't even his own." She paused, her gaze returning to Caspar. "For that debt, I will grant you passage through our territory. But know this, we cannot give you more than passage. If the council learns we aided you, they will burn the Tannenwald to ash. Passage is enough, Ulrich said quietly. We're heading for the northern river crossing. Brunhild nodded. My wolves will ensure no enforcers follow you through our lands. But once you cross the river, you're on your own. Her eyes narrowed. You're the rogue king. It wasn't a question. Ulrich inclined his head in acknowledgement. I've heard stories about your army. Some say you're building a force strong enough to challenge the council. Brunhild crossed her arms. Are the stories true? We're building something, Ulrich said carefully. Whether it's enough remains to be seen. Then hear me, rogue king. If you truly mean to overthrow the current regime, you have the Tannenwald Pack's quiet support. We cannot fight openly. Our neutrality protects too many refugees who flee through our borders, but we can provide intelligence, safe passage, and sanctuary for those you send our way. The offer was more than Adelheid had dared hope for. Ulrich seemed equally surprised, though he hid it well. Why? He asked simply. Brunhild's smile was sharp. Because the council's purity movement is a disease that will eventually infect even the forest packs. They've already begun pressuring us to submit to their genetic screenings, to prove our bloodlines are acceptable. We've refused, but pressure is mounting. Better to support those who would cut out the infection now than wait until we're forced to fight alone. Then we accept your offer, Ulrich said formally. And we thank you for the debt paid to Herzog Ulrich's memory. Brunhild nodded, then looked once more at Caspar. When he's grown, bring him back to the Tannenwald. I would know the man he becomes. If we survive long enough for him to grow, I promise you'll meet him, Adelheid said softly. The forest alpha smiled, a genuine expression that softened her severe features. You're brave, young mother. The child is lucky to have found you. Before Adelheid could correct the assumption, Brunhild had shifted back into wolf form and melted into the shadows with her packmates. They were alone again in the forest, the night air suddenly feeling colder. That was unexpected, Ulrich said after a moment. Adelheid let out a shaky breath. She called me his mother. You are, in every way that matters. Ulrich started walking again, slower this time. Blood doesn't make a parent. Choice does. You chose him, chose to sacrifice your safety for his survival. That's more than most biological parents give. The words settled into Adelheid's chest, warming something that had felt cold since the moment she'd taken custody of Caspar. She'd been so focused on protecting him, on honoring his dead mother's wishes, that she hadn't let herself examine her own feelings toward the infant in her arms. But Ulrich was right. Somewhere in the past 12 weeks, Caspar had stopped being a responsibility and become her son. They reached the river as false dawn began graying the eastern sky. The water ran fast and deep, swollen with early winter snowmelt. On the far bank, Adelheid could make out structures through the trees, buildings that looked hastily constructed but sturdy. Welcome to Frost Home, Ulrich said, gesturing across the water. The heart of the coalition. You built a village, Adelheid breathed. We built a home, he corrected gently. For everyone the council cast out. Families live there, Adelheid. Children, elders, not just warriors. We're not just an army. We're trying to preserve a way of life. The implications made her chest tighten. This wasn't just a military operation. Ulrich had created a refuge, a place where wolves could live according to the old ways, free from the council's increasingly draconian rules. How do we cross? The river was too deep and fast to wade, especially while carrying an infant. Ulrich put 2 fingers to his lips and whistled, a complex pattern that carried across the water. Moments later, a figure appeared on the far bank and began pulling on a rope. A ferry platform emerged from camouflage on their side of the river, cleverly hidden among the reeds. We built it 6 months ago, Ulrich explained as he helped Adelheid onto the platform. The council doesn't know it exists. The crossing took 5 minutes, the platform moving smoothly along an underwater cable system. Adelheid used the time to study the village taking shape ahead, At least 20 buildings she could see, with smoke rising from chimneys, with laundry hung between trees, with the unmistakable signs of a functioning community. The figure operating the ferry resolved into a young man as they approached the far bank, mid-20s, with the same amber eyes that marked him as Pack. He grinned when he saw Ulrich. "Boss, we were starting to worry. You were supposed to be back yesterday." "Plans changed, Gottfried." Ulrich stepped off the platform, then turned to help Adelheid across with Casper. "We have a guest. This is Adelheid, and she's under my personal protection. Make sure everyone knows." Gottfried's eyes widened as he looked at Adelheid, then widened further when he spotted Casper. "Is that Herzog Ulrich's heir?" Ulrich confirmed quietly. "And yes, it's as complicated as you're thinking. Get word to Emmerich that I need a council meeting within the hour. Emergency priority. On it." Gottfried took off at a run toward the village. Adelheid watched him go, then turned to Ulrich. "Emmerich, my second in command. He's been running Frost home while I was away." Ulbricht's hand found the small of her back, guiding her forward. "Come on. You need food, rest, and warm clothes. The council meeting can wait until you've had a chance to recover." "I'm fine," Adelheid protested, even as exhaustion pulled at her bones. "You're dead on your feet," Ulrich countered. "And you need to feed Casper. When's the last time he ate?" Adelheid tried to remember and came up blank. Before the barn. Or had she managed to feed him in the cellar? The past hours blurred together, adrenaline and grief creating gaps in her memory. "I don't remember," she admitted quietly. Ulbricht's expression softened. "Then we feed him first. Everything else can wait." He led her through the village. Frost home he'd called it, and Adelheid felt curious eyes tracking their progress. Wolves emerged from buildings, their conversations dying as they spotted the infant in her arms. Word was spreading fast. By the time they reached a larger structure at the village center, a crowd had gathered. Ulrich ignored them, pushing open the door to what appeared to be his personal quarters. A single large room with a fireplace, a bed, a desk covered in maps, and shelves lined with books and weapons in equal measure. It was sparse but functional, the space of someone who spent more time working than living. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the bed. "I'll get milk and supplies." Adelheid sank onto the mattress, her legs finally giving out. Casper stirred in her arms, his face scrunching in pre-cry distress. She rocked him automatically, murmuring soothing nonsense as Ulrich rummaged through storage chests. He returned with a bottle, milk powder, and warm water from a kettle that had been sitting by the fire. His movements were efficient as he mixed the formula, tested the temperature, then handed it to Adelheid. Casper latched onto the bottle desperately, his tiny hands coming up to grip it with surprising strength. Adelheid watched him eat, her heart clenching with a fierce protectiveness that still surprised her with its intensity. "You're good with him," Ulrich observed, settling into a chair across from her. "I've had 12 weeks of practice." Adelheid's voice was soft. "The first few days were terrifying. I'd never held a baby before, let alone cared for one. But instinct took over. My wolf knew what to do even when I didn't." "Your wolf bonded with him." Ulbricht's gaze was steady. "That's rare outside of biological offspring. Herzog Ulrich's mate, her name was Lisbeth, she begged me to love him as my own. I think my wolf took that plea as a sacred command." Adelheid stroked Casper's fine hair, watching his eyes drift closed as he fed. "He's Pack. That's all that matters to my wolf. Pack means family, and family means everything." Silence settled between them, comfortable despite the years of separation and the chaos of their reunion. Ulrich watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something tender and pained mixed together. "I'm sorry about Greta," he said finally. "I know words don't help, but I'm sorry you lost her." The grief rushed back, immediate and raw. Adelheid blinked against the burn of tears. She was supposed to come back. We were going to take Casper north together, cross into the unclaimed territories, start over somewhere the council's reach didn't extend. The unclaimed territories are gone, Ulrich said gently. The council annexed them 8 months ago. There's nowhere left to run that isn't either council-controlled or allied with my coalition. The information settled like lead in Adelheid's stomach. No neutral ground left. No safe havens. Only the choice between submission or rebellion. Then we fight, she said again, more firmly this time. We fight and we win, because the alternative is watching everyone we love die one by one. Ulrich's smile was fierce with approval. Spoken like an alpha's mate. The words hung in the air between them, laden with implications neither was quite ready to address. Adelheid felt heat creep up her neck. They'd never officially bonded, never completed the mating ritual that would tie their wolves together permanently. The council's coup had happened before they'd had the chance. But the intention had been there. The promise had been spoken. Caspar finished his bottle and immediately fell asleep, his little body going limp with satisfaction. Adelheid set the bottle aside and adjusted him against her shoulder, patting his back gently until he burped. You really have done this before, Ulrich murmured. 73 times a day for 12 weeks, Adelheid confirmed. I could burp a baby in my sleep at this point. A knock sounded at the door before Ulrich could respond. He rose smoothly, his entire demeanor shifting into command mode. Enter. The door opened to admit a wolf Adelheid didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples and shrewd green eyes that assessed her in a single glance. This had to be Emmerich. You called an emergency council meeting, Emmerich said without preamble. The others are gathering in the hall. But first I need to know, is that really Ulrich's heir? It is. Ulrich moved to stand beside Adelheid, a subtle claim of protection. This is Adelheid, Ulrich's cousin's daughter. She's been hiding the boy since his birth. The council knows he exists now. We killed Dietrich's entire squad extracting them. Emmerich's expression remained carefully neutral, but his eyes widened fractionally. Dietrich's dead. Very. Ulrich's voice held grim satisfaction. Along with 11 enforcers. The council will consider it a direct act of war. They'll send the full force of their military after us. Emmerich's gaze moved to Caspar. For that child? Yes. Ulrich didn't flinch from the assessment. Which is why we need to move up our timeline. We can't afford to wait until spring to make our move against the council. They'll hunt Frostholm down within weeks once they realize where we've taken refuge. Emmerich was silent for a long moment, his expression calculating. Then slowly he smiled. Or we use their desperation against them. They want the child badly enough to mobilize their entire military. But let them come to us. Let them overextend their supply lines and expose their vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, we've got exactly what we need to rally every moderate pack sitting on the fence, a living heir with legitimate claim to the throne. That's what I thought, Ulrich agreed. But I needed to hear you say it. The council meets now. They're waiting. Emmerich's gaze returned to Adelheid, measuring. She should be there. If she's to be part of this, the inner circle needs to meet her. Adelheid stood, still cradling Caspar. I'm ready. Emmerich's eyes glinted with something like respect. I believe you are. The council hall turned out to be the largest building in Frostholm, a timber structure that smelled of fresh-cut pine and wolf musk. Inside, 7 wolves waited around a rough-hewn table, their conversations dying the moment Ulrich entered with Adelheid at his side. These were the coalition's leadership, Adelheid realized. Each one radiated alpha-level authority, their wolves strong enough to lead their own packs. Yet they deferred to Ulrich without question, their body language acknowledging his dominance. This is Adelheid, Ulrich announced without preamble. And the child she carries is Herzog Ulrich's legitimate heir, Caspar, son of Ulrich and Lisbeth. The council has been hunting them for 12 weeks. Last night they nearly succeeded. I killed Dietrich and his squad to extract them. Shocked silence met this announcement, followed by an explosion of voices. Dietrich's dead. The heir is alive. This changes everything. We're not ready for open war. Ulrich raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. I know this complicates our timeline, but we don't have a choice anymore. The council knows Caspar exists and that I've taken him under my protection. They'll throw everything they have at us to eliminate the threat he represents. Then we're starting a war we can't win. The speaker was a woman with frost-white hair and ice-blue eyes, her expression fierce. We have 300 wolves against the council's 5,000. Those odds are suicide. Not if we fight smart, Emmerich interjected. The council's forces are spread across 7 territories maintaining their occupation. They can't pull everyone to attack us without leaving their conquered lands vulnerable to uprising. He's right, added another wolf, this one older with silver streaking his brown hair. My contacts in the southern territories report growing unrest. The purity movement's genetic screenings are increasingly invasive. Families are being separated, bloodlines declared unsuitable and exiled. People are angry. They just need a symbol to rally behind. And we have one. Ulrich's hand came to rest on Adelheid's shoulder. The rightful heir, alive and under our protection. We announce his survival. We call for all wolves who remember the old ways to rise up, and we coordinate simultaneous uprisings across every occupied territory. The council can't fight on 7 fronts at once. The white-haired woman, whose name Adelheid learned was Ursula, shook her head slowly. It's a massive risk. If the uprisings fail, if the people don't rally, we'll have exposed ourselves for nothing. And if we do nothing, we condemn Caspar to death and ourselves to slow annihilation. Adelheid spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the debate. 7 pairs of eyes swiveled to her. The council won't stop with hunting one child. They've already annexed the unclaimed territories. They've begun pressuring the forest packs. How long before they come for Frostholm regardless? How long before they decide any wolf not under their direct control is a threat to be eliminated? She's right, said the older wolf. The council's aggression is escalating. We've been documenting their movements. Territorial expansion, military buildup, increasing brutality in their enforcement. These are the actions of a regime preparing for total dominance, not peaceful governance. Ursula's expression remained skeptical, but she nodded slowly. Fine. Say we announce the heir's survival and call for uprisings. What's the actual plan? How do we coordinate across 7 territories simultaneously? How do we protect Frostholm when the council inevitably attacks? How do we keep this child alive long enough to matter? We split our forces, Ulrich said, moving to the table where maps lay spread across the surface. The main force stays here to defend Frostholm and protect Caspar. Smaller teams deploy to each territory to coordinate with local resistance cells. We hit the council's infrastructure. Supply depots, communication lines, enforcement stations, all at once, creating chaos they can't contain. His finger traced lines across the map as he spoke, indicating targets and routes. The other council members leaned in, their initial skepticism transforming into strategic focus. The announcement of Caspar's survival goes out 3 days before the uprisings, Emmerich added. Gives people time to spread the word, to organize, but not enough time for the council to consolidate a response. 3 days isn't enough, Ursula argued. We need at least a week. A week gives them time to find Frostholm, Ulrich countered. We're hidden now, but Dietrich's squad had a last known position. The council will track their final movements, will realize they died here. Every additional day is a day they get closer to finding us. The debate continued, voices rising and falling as the council members argued strategy, logistics, risks. Adelheid listened, cradling Caspar against her chest, watching Ulrich command the room with natural authority. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. Brilliant, strategic, unwavering in his convictions. But he was also harder now than he'd been 3 years ago. The softness she'd known had been burned away by exile and loss, replaced with a razor-sharp focus that was equally compelling and slightly terrifying. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, Ulrich called for a vote. All in favor of accelerating our timeline and announcing Casper's survival as the first move in a coordinated uprising. 7 hands rose, including Ursula's, though hers came up last and with obvious reluctance. The measure passes unanimously. Ulrich's gaze swept the table. Emmerich, you're in charge of coordinating with resistance cells. Ursula, you handle defensive preparations for Frostholm. The rest of you know your roles. We move in 72 hours. The council members filed out, their expressions ranging from determined to apprehensive. Only Emmerich lingered, his gaze moving between Ulrich and Adelheid with knowing assessment. She's staying with you, he said. Not a question. Yes. Ulrich's voice left no room for argument. The pack will talk. They'll assume. Emmerich paused delicately. They can assume whatever they want, Ulrich said flatly. Adelheid and Casper are under my direct protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. Emmerich's lips quirked. Fair enough. Though you might want to make the bond official sooner rather than later. It would strengthen her position, give her authority to speak on behalf of the coalition. When there's time. Ulrich's jaw tightened. Right now we have a war to plan. Emmerich nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Silence filled the hall, broken only by Casper's soft breathing. He's right, you know, Adelheid said quietly. About the bond. If I'm going to be part of this, if Casper's going to be the symbol your rebellion rallies behind, I need to have official standing. You want to complete the mating ritual. Ulrich's voice was carefully neutral. Adelheid met his gaze directly. Do you not want to? I want. He broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. 3 years ago, I would have bonded with you without hesitation. But now, we've both changed, Adelheid. We've both been through things that left scars. I need to know that you're choosing this because you want it, not because it's politically convenient. The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. She crossed to him, mindful of the sleeping infant in her arms, and stopped close enough that she could feel his body heat. I mourned you, she said softly. For 6 months, I grieved like you'd taken half my soul with you. And maybe you did because I've felt incomplete ever since. But these past hours, running with you, fighting beside you, planning this impossible war, I feel whole again. So yes, I want the bond. Not for politics. For us. Ulrich's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. I never stopped loving you. Even thinking you'd betrayed me, even watching you with another man's child, I couldn't stop. Not another man's child, Adelheid whispered. Ours if you'll claim him. Because I'm not giving him up, Ulrich. If you bond with me, you're taking on the responsibility of raising Ulrich's heir as our own. I know. His smile was soft, genuine. And I wouldn't have it any other way. He's brave and strong, and he's survived against impossible odds. Just like his mother. The word mother sent warmth flooding through Adelheid's chest. Not guardian. Not protector. Mother. Then we'll make it official, she said. After the war. When there's time to do it properly, with ceremony and witnesses and celebration. After the war, Ulrich agreed. He leaned down, his forehead touching hers, careful not to disturb Casper between them. But you should know, in my heart the bond already exists. Never broke. Not through death or distance or misunderstanding. Mine either, Adelheid breathed. The moment hung between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Then Casper made a small noise, and reality crashed back. They had 72 hours before announcing the heir's survival to the world. 72 hours before every wolf loyal to the old ways would be called to rise up against the council's tyranny. 72 hours before open war became inevitable. But in this moment, standing in the council hall with Ulrich's hand warm against her face and their sleeping child nestled between them, Adelheid felt something she hadn't felt since the night of the coup. The next 3 days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. Adelheid found herself integrated into Frostholm's daily life with surprising ease. The other wolves treated her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Respect for her protection of Caspar, curiosity about her relationship with Ulrich. She helped where she could, one arm always occupied with Caspar while the other assisted with food preparation, message coding, supply organization. The women of Frostholm took her under their wing immediately, offering advice on infant care that she mostly didn't need but accepted graciously anyway. Ulrich was everywhere at once, meeting with scouts, reviewing defensive positions, coordinating with Emmerich's network of resistance contacts. But he always returned to his quarters at night, always checked on Adelheid and Caspar before collapsing into exhausted sleep. They hadn't shared a bed. Propriety and exhaustion kept them separate, Adelheid sleeping in Ulbrich's quarters while he took a spare room nearby. But the emotional intimacy was building with every shared glance, every casual touch, every moment of working together toward a common goal. On the 3rd day everything changed. Ulrich burst into the quarters mid-morning, his expression grim. "We have a problem." Adelheid looked up from where she was feeding Caspar. "What kind of problem?" "The council knows about Frostholm. They're mobilizing a force to attack, not their main military, but a significant contingent. 500 wolves, fully armed, led by Commander Rudiger himself." Commander Rudiger. The name made Adelheid's blood run cold. He was the council's most brutal enforcer, known for razing entire villages suspected of harboring rebels. If he was leading the attack personally, the council wanted Frostholm eliminated completely. "How long do we have?" Her voice was surprisingly steady. 2 days. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. Ulrich moved to the window, staring out at the village that had become home to so many displaced wolves. "We're accelerating the announcement. Goes out tonight. The uprisings launch tomorrow at dawn." "That's not enough time for people to organize," Adelheid protested. "It's the time we have." Ulrich turned back to her, his expression haunted. "The resistance cells have been planning for months. They're ready to move on short notice. It's not ideal, but it's our only chance." Adelheid stood, settling Caspar against her shoulder. "Then we'd better make sure the announcement is powerful enough to inspire immediate action." Ulbrich's lips quirked into something resembling a smile. "I was hoping you'd say that. 'Cause I need you to be part of it. People need to see Caspar, yes, but they also need to see the woman who protected him at the cost of everything. They need to understand that this isn't just about restoring a bloodline, it's about preserving our way of life against those who would destroy it." The request made sense even as it terrified her. Public speaking had never been Adelheid's strength. But this wasn't about her comfort. This was about giving people a reason to fight. "What do you need me to do?" The announcement was recorded at dusk in the council hall, with witnesses present to verify its authenticity. Ulrich spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of authority and conviction. "To all wolves who remember the old ways, who remember when pack law meant protecting the vulnerable instead of persecuting them, who remember when bloodline meant heritage to honor rather than purity to enforce, the Council of Regents has lied to you. They announced the execution of Herzog Ulrich's infant son 2 months ago. They told you the bloodline was cleansed, the threat to their new order eliminated. But Herzog Caspar lives. He survived because of the courage of one woman who sacrificed everything to honor a dying mother's final plea. I am Ulrich, called the Rogue King, and I stand before you with the rightful heir to the Alpha throne. The Council's reign of terror is built on lies and brutality. They murdered Ulrich not because he was unfit to lead, but because he refused to participate in their genocidal purity movement. Tomorrow at dawn we rise. Every territory, every resistance cell, every wolf who believes that strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. We rise together, and we tear down the regime that has tormented our people for 3 years. This is not a call for vengeance. This is a call for justice. This is a call for the return of the old ways, where pack meant family and family meant everything. Then it was Adelheid's turn. She stepped forward, Caspar visible in her arms, his grey eyes alert and curious despite the late hour. "My name is Adelheid. I am nobody important. Not an alpha, not a warrior, not anyone the council would consider significant. But 12 weeks ago, I caught this child as his mother died from wounds inflicted by the council's enforcers. She begged me to protect him, to love him, to give him a chance at the life they wanted to steal. I have run, have hidden. I have sacrificed everything, my home, my safety, my sister's life, to honor that oath. And I would do it again, because this child represents something the council fears more than any army. He represents hope. Hope that the old ways aren't dead. Hope that bloodlines carrying power and heritage and connection to our ancient traditions can survive their purge. Hope that we can build a future where our children are valued for who they are, not measured against arbitrary standards of purity. Tomorrow, when you rise up against your oppressors, remember why you fight. You fight for children like Caspar who deserve to grow up free. You fight for the families torn apart by the council's screenings. You fight for every wolf who's been declared unsuitable and exiled to die. You fight because the alternative is watching everything we are, everything we've been for thousands of years, get erased in the name of order and purity. Herzog Caspar lives. And while he lives, so does hope. The recording ended. Silence filled the hall as the witnesses processed what they'd just heard. Then someone started clapping. Ursula, her ice-blue eyes bright with something that might have been tears. The applause spread, filling the space with the sound of approval and solidarity. "It's perfect," Emmerich said quietly. "Exactly what we needed. Now we just have to survive long enough for it to matter," Ulrich replied grimly. The message was sent out that night through every channel the coalition controlled, coded messages to resistance cells, broadcasts over captured radio frequencies, couriers dispatched to neutral territories. By morning, every wolf in every territory would know that Herzog Ulrich's heir lived, that the rogue king had claimed him under protection, and that the time for uprising had come. Adelheid didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching Frostholm's lights slowly wink out as wolves settled into rest before the storm. Caspar slept peacefully in a cradle someone had built for him, unaware that his existence had just become the catalyst for civil war. Ulrich entered quietly, crossing to stand beside her at the window. "It's going to be brutal," he said softly. "Even if the uprisings succeed, even if the moderate packs rally to our cause, hundreds of wolves will die tomorrow." "I know." Adelheid's voice was equally quiet. "But thousands more will die if we do nothing. The council's purity movement won't stop until they've eliminated everyone who doesn't fit their vision." "You've grown harder," Ulrich observed. 3 years ago, the thought of causing deaths would have devastated you. 3 years ago, I hadn't watched Greta die. Hadn't spent 12 weeks running from enforcers who would kill an infant for the crime of existing. Adelheid turned to meet his gaze. "I'm not harder, Ulrich. I'm just more honest about the reality we're facing." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The council will be here in 2 days. Maybe less if they push their forces hard. When they come, I need you to take Caspar and run." "No." The refusal was immediate and absolute. "Adelheid." "No," she repeated firmly. "I've run for 12 weeks. I'm done running. If Frostholm falls, we fall together. If we survive together. I won't abandon you again." "You didn't abandon me the first time," Ulrich said gently. "I was taken from you. The result was the same. 3 years apart, thinking the other was dead or had moved on." Adelheid reached out, taking his hand. "I won't let that happen again. We're in this together, for better or worse." Ulbricht's fingers tightened around hers. "You're asking me to risk Caspar's life on a defensive battle we might not win. I'm asking you to trust that sometimes standing and fighting is the better choice than running." Adelheid held his gaze. "You built something here, Ulrich. Home. Community. A symbol of resistance against tyranny. If we abandon Frostholm at the first real threat, what message does that send? That we're only brave when it's convenient. That we'll surrender our home to save one life. Casper's life is worth more than Frostholm, Ulrich argued. He's the heir. The symbol. And symbols are worthless if the people defending them won't stand their ground. Adelheid's voice softened. I understand your instinct to protect him at all costs. But sometimes the best protection is showing him, and everyone watching, that we're willing to fight for what matters. Ulrich was silent for a long time, his expression torn. Finally, he pulled her close, his arms coming around her carefully to avoid disturbing Casper's cradle nearby. You're going to be the death of me, he murmured against her hair. Or the making of you, Adelheid replied. They stood there as the night deepened, holding each other while the world prepared for war. Dawn broke on the day of reckoning with reports flooding in from every territory. The uprisings had begun. In the southern territories, resistance cells had seized 3 enforcement stations and freed dozens of imprisoned wolves. In the eastern lands, a coordinated attack on supply depots had cut off the council's military from critical resources. The Western Territories reported that 2 moderate pacts had openly declared for the coalition, bringing their forces to support the rebellion. But the Northern Territories were silent. No reports. No word of uprisings or support. They're either being jammed or they've been crushed, Emmerich said grimly, staring at the communications board where messages continued to pour in, everywhere except the north. Ulbricht's expression was granite. The Northern Territories have always been council strongholds. We knew they'd be the hardest to turn. If they've crushed the northern resistance, they can redirect those forces here, Ursula pointed out. Combined with Rudiger's column, we could be facing upwards of 800 wolves. The numbers made Adelheid's stomach clench. Frostholm had 300 defenders, many of them civilians with minimal combat training. 800 council wolves would be a slaughter. Then we even the odds, Ulrich said decisively. He turned to one of the scouts. Get word to Brunhild in the Tannenwald. Remind her of the alliance she offered. Tell her if the forest packs want to stop the council's expansion, now is the time to act. That's assuming she'll honor the offer, Ursula said skeptically. Forest packs talk a good game about supporting resistance, but when it comes to actual fighting, she'll honor it, Adelheid interjected. Everyone turned to look at her. I saw her face when she looked at Casper. She meant what she said about remembering Herzog Ulrich's kindness. Besides, if Frostholm falls, the council's next target will be the Tannenwald. She's smart enough to know that. Ulrich nodded. Get the message to Brunhild. And start fortifying the river crossing. If they're coming, that's where we'll make our stand. The next hours were chaos as Frostholm transformed into a fortress. Barricades went up along the river. Archers positioned themselves in trees. Traps were set along every approach route. The elderly and very young were evacuated to deeper caves in the mountains, their protests overridden by necessity. Adelheid found herself assigned to the medical station. Her experience caring for Casper apparently qualifying her to help with triage. She worked alongside 3 other wolves with healing training, preparing supplies, organizing bandages, trying not to think about how many wounded they were preparing to receive. Casper remained with her, tucked into a sling against her chest. His presence a constant reminder of what they were fighting to protect. By mid-afternoon, scouts brought confirmation of what they'd feared. Rudiger's force had joined with reinforcements from the Northern Territories. 900 wolves were marching on Frostholm, with Commander Rudiger at their head. They'll be here by dawn, the scout reported. They're not even trying to hide their approach. They want us to know they're coming, want us to be afraid. Let them come, Ulrich said coldly. We'll show them what fear really looks like. But privately to Adelheid, his expression was grim. 900 against 300. Those odds. Brunhild will come, Adelheid insisted. And if she doesn't? Adelheid met his gaze steadily. Then we fight anyway. Because the alternative is surrendering everything we believe in. Night fell, and still no word from the Tannenwald pack. The defenders of Frostholm took their positions, weapons ready, wolves stretched thin along defensive lines that were never meant to hold against such overwhelming numbers. Ulrich stood at the river crossing with Emmerich at his side, watching the forest for signs of the approaching enemy. Behind them, Frostholm's lights burned defiantly, a beacon of resistance in the darkness. Adelheid joined him, Caspar asleep in his sling, her own wolf rising close to the surface in preparation for the battle ahead. "Last chance to reconsider," Ulrich said quietly. "Not a chance in hell," Adelheid replied. He smiled, fierce and proud. Then he kissed her, deep and claiming and desperate, as if he could memorize the taste of her in case it was the last time. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "After this is over," Ulrich said, "we complete the bond properly. Ceremony, witnesses, all of it." "It's a date," Adelheid agreed. Then the howls began, distant but growing closer, hundreds of voices raised in coordinated threat. The Council's forces were announcing their approach, psychological warfare meant to terrify the defenders. Frostholm's wolves howled back, defiant and unafraid. And from the Tannenwald, a third set of howls rose, deep and ancient and utterly unmistakable. The forest pack was coming. Brunhild emerged from the trees at the head of 200 wolves, her massive grey form rippling with barely contained power. She shifted to human form as she reached Ulbricht's position, her expression fierce. "The Council thinks they can threaten the forest." She bared her teeth in a feral smile. "Let them learn otherwise." Relief and gratitude flooded through Adelheid. 500 defenders now. Still outnumbered but no longer quite so desperately. "Your timing is perfect," Ulrich said. "We've been watching since you sent word," Brunhild replied. "Wanted to see how committed you were to this fight before committing ourselves. But when we saw your people standing their ground despite the odds," she shrugged. "Cowardice is not a forest pack trait." The enemy wolves broke from the tree line half a mile distant, a massive force moving with military precision. At their head, Commander Rudiger's enormous black wolf form was clearly visible even in the darkness. "Defensive positions," Ulrich commanded. The howl went up, and 500 wolves readied themselves for battle. Rudiger's forces didn't hesitate. They hit the river crossing like a tsunami, overwhelming the first defensive line through sheer numbers. But the defenders held the second line, using the narrow crossing to prevent the Council forces from bringing their full numbers to bear. The battle was brutal and immediate. Wolves snarled and snapped, teeth and claws tearing through fur and flesh. The river ran red within minutes. Adelheid watched from her position in the medical station, her heart in her throat as she tracked Ulbricht's silver form through the chaos. He fought like something primal and terrible, his alpha dominance allowing him to tear through lesser wolves with devastating efficiency. Beside him, Emmerich protected his flank. And nearby, Brunhild was a force of nature, her forest wolves fighting with a ferocity that spoke of generations defending their territory. But the Council forces kept coming. For every wolf they cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place. Slowly, inevitably, the defensive line began to buckle. Then something unexpected happened. From the south, howls rose, different from either the Council forces or the coalition. Adelheid's heart leaped as she recognized the pattern. Southern Territory wolves. The resistance cells that had seized the enforcement stations were coming to reinforce Frostholm. They crashed into Rudiger's forces from behind, catching them between 2 fronts. The tactical advantage shifted instantly. The Council wolves, suddenly surrounded, began to falter. Rudiger himself charged toward Ulbricht, clearly intending to end the battle by killing the coalition's leader. But Ulbricht was ready. The 2 alphas collided in a clash that sent nearby wolves scattering.